The Last Queen of the Underverse, Book 1, The Queen's Saga, Intro. The story so far. Queen Lyra was dying, and she would be dead by the time the sun set in the Underverse. She had discovered this truth long ago in the Garden of Nowhere, where the light rarely changed and the air always hummed with memory. Her dark blue skin glowed in that endless golden hour as a soft wind stirred the willows and tugged at her midnight robes. Tiny stars shimmered across the fabric like slow drifting embers. The Garden of Nowhere wasn't connected to anywhere, hence its name. She had been granted semi-permanent access only after a hard-fought bargaining. Personally, she suspected the garden was lonely and only wanted companionship. That was probably why it had said yes in the end. The garden was illuminated by a timeless golden hour glow, with sporadic moments of twilight. She wore no crown, never needing one. Her auburn hair, tinged with copper, framed a face that looked like that of a human woman around 35. However, she was not human. She was Lyra, queen of the Underverse, its guardian, its captive, and now the final witness to its gradual decline. When it was announced that her passing would soon come, beings considered immortal sought an audience with her. The voice in the Dente Nocturne had visited her the night before. Although she could have done without the Dente Nocturne's presence, she was surprised that protocol had permitted its passage, so long as it kept to itself. One had come to pay their respect with a personal message from Crazy Mike. The other had come to gloat. The last evening star had visited the previous week, gifting her a song meant only for her. She had wept and laughed when it was over. Patchlord gifted her a bottle of his finest wine. Even the Fugazi had emerged from the labyrinth of the last wish, and surprised her with a picnic lunch. There were a few others, of course, but those had been more formal, less personal. Almost everyone blessed her, thanked her, or wished her well on her next journey, nearly everyone. There were some so arrogant that you couldn't please them. Still, Lyra was content and had learned to cherish her final moments, although time did behave oddly in the Underverse, especially in the Garden of Nowhere. She walked toward its center, where the doorway to everywhere stood. She watched the small, furry brown gnomes tending the grounds, and recalled years of coaxing, scolding, and praising them with varying degrees of success. Sometimes they listened, sometimes they didn't. The garden wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't safe either. It teemed with diverse flora and fauna. Some of the flora were even carnivorous. That part of the garden was reserved for unruly guests. She chuckled, trying to recall the name, Paul perhaps, of the intruder who once tried to clear-cut the garden for something silly like profit. He'd been surprised to discover the flora's sharp teeth, claws, and inconvenient fondness for raw meat. Lyra often strolled the Queen's Path, a route shaped by the garden itself, lined with tall, willowy oaks and crossed by gentle streams under a pink sun. Her favorite blossoms and fruits flourished along its edges. Sometimes she invited companions and lovers for picnics on the nearby hill. She particularly cherished the quiet walks during the rare blue and twilight hours, moments she seldom shared. The last time had been with a young man in a fire cloak who had lost his name before venturing into the canyons of Neverwhere. A pleasant young man, he eventually rediscovered his name, though it couldn't mend his sorrow. She halted before the door, where to everywhere. She reached out and brushed her hand across the ancient wooden door. It vibrated dully to her touch, as always. She closed her eyes and could smell the cinnamon of the blue blooms around the doorway. Lyra had felt the garden's quiet pleasure as she had walked its myriad paths. It would miss her in its own way. Joy lived here, and she was grateful to have experienced it. The Underverse believed the Garden of Nowhere had grown around this particular doorway to everywhere. That was why she had wanted to visit it so long ago. The doorway had never been opened in front of her in her lifetime. According to the garden, it had been seldom opened at all. Every doorway to everywhere had been opened once at the beginning, or so the Underverse claimed. Now most were locked, their keys long lost. The few that remained open were scattered across all of creation. As her long life drew to a close, she found herself drawn more and more to the doorway. It had been there at the beginning, and it might be there at the end. What began as monthly trips became weekly, then daily visits. Her visits had become a ritual. Then, one day, without thinking, she knocked in a rhythmic pattern. Knockety, 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 knockety. Knock, knock. She did it 3 times. There was never a reply. The heavy door where remained locked. Day after day, as her life waned, she knocked and turned the knob, always to no avail. The queen knew this was her final day. The Underverse would go on without anyone to inherit her responsibilities. It would be adrift, like a shoal in an endless sea. Creation wouldn't end, but it would suffer. Her role as protector had always been to hold back the suffering from the unease. Change was inevitable, and not all of it was kind. Those with power, the ones who could shift, would escape the unease, leaving others to face the capricious Fugazi and the dread Dente Nocturne. Some might find refuge in the soft places, those fleeting, unpredictable sanctuaries like the elusive Fiddler's Green, which promised safety, but often vanished before one arrived. The storm was fast approaching, and her heart ached for what she was leaving behind. Yet almost no one believed her now. She had lived too long. Only a handful from the previous age remained, the Dente Nocturne, Star, and Patchlord. The Voice and Crazy Mike were the last of the first ones. If the stories were true, they had also been there. The Fugazi, who was perhaps the oldest of them all, had seen more than one Underverse rebirth. Still, she got what everyone gets, a lifetime. She hadn't been there herself, her predecessor, Queen Selene, had, but she carried that protector's memories. Through them, she could see the bleed between realities, the unease erasing and excising entire worlds, their stories lost. She knew her body couldn't hold out much longer. After eons, it was inevitable. Chaos would follow. No queen, no protector. The unease would march unfettered. Change was coming fast. There had been another once. One had who refused the crown. Her daughter, long lost to choice and story alike. All Lyra had left was her daughter's name, Dorothy, her smile, and an empty hole in her memory. Lyra sighed. Our greatest failure, no one left to carry the mantle. There had been others, but something or someone had tampered with them. Then there had been the quarry. She wiped a tear from her face. As the queen approached the doorway to everywhere, for the last time, she raised her hand and knocked 3 times in a playful pattern. Knockety, 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 knockety. Knock, knock. Nothing. She gave the doorknob a little jiggle. She sighed and turned away, then froze. The doorknob rattled once, then again, frantic for a moment, then abruptly ceased. A soft click echoed in the lock. The door creaked open, revealing an entrance shrouded in shadow. The wind began to whip around her, pulling at her hair and robes. A shiver ran down her spine. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward, clad in intricate, peculiar armor. It glinted faintly in the golden light as it crossed the threshold into her world. Thank you for listening to the intro of The Last Queen of the Underverse, Book 1, The Queen Saga. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you'd like to find out more about the story, you can pick up a copy on Amazon, or you can stop by my website and pick up a signed copy there. If this particular production of this narration becomes popular, I'll probably make more of these. Thank you again for your time. Leave any comments below, and hopefully I'll see you out there in the Underverse. Thanks.